Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to yet another Destiny 2 video, and today we're going to be Negative Nancy for a second and talk about the problems surrounding strikes. Coming from Destiny 1, I was hoping for new strike bosses with interesting, yet new mechanics while being surrounded by beautiful environmental design. On top of all this, I was most definitely expecting lots of awesome looking and unique strike-specific loot. To my surprise though, most of my expectations fell short by miles. As a matter of fact, the only thing that currently interests me about strikes is their visual appearance and design. Now that's great and all, but the fundamentals of a fantastic video game, in my humble opinion, don't only include beautiful design work. Hopefully this video will encourage more discussion about strikes, because in their current form they're not enticing, nor do they give players an incentive to play them at all. I know things will get better from this point on, but it's really difficult to not feel frustrated as a consumer when I waited years for Destiny 1 to become the game it was promised to be. With that being said, we're going to split this video into three categories. Firstly, the bosses themselves, then we'll take a look at the boss mechanics, and last but not least, we'll take a look at the absolutely horrendous loot. My friends and I basically had somewhat of an epiphany the other day, and it really made me realize how lousy all the bosses were, and not in the way that you'd think. We looked at all 6 strike bosses, which included the PlayStation exclusive strike, and noticed one cheesy similarity. All the bosses are exact reskins of enemies that existed in Destiny 1. Let's look at Exodus Crash, the boss called Thavix the Departed. He's a regular vandal that simply goes invisible and is bigger. Next up, we have the Inverted Spire. We have Protheon Modular Mind, which is a Minotaur, just bigger. In fact, he looks just like Atheon. For the third strike, we have the Pyramidion, hopefully I said that right. The boss for this is the Genesis Mind. He's simply Hobgoblin, get this, but bigger. Another strike we have is Savathun's Song. This is a name I've seen throughout YouTube lore videos, so normally I was extremely excited to take on one of Oryx's powerful sisters. Upon completing this strike, you'll notice the boss is called the Dark Heart, and it's a streaker, but get this, just bigger. Next, we have the Arms Dealer, and at first, I thought it sounded like the boss was going to have multiple attack types, multiple weapons, and it was going to be an overall awesome boss. And when you get to the boss, you encounter Brachiosaurus, a Cabal Centurion that is simply bigger. To Bungie's credit though, they did give this boss a laser, so that was different, I guess. And then finally, we have Lake of Shadows, a PS4 exclusive strike with Grask the Consumed as the boss. To my surprise, he was a regular take in Phalanx, but simply bigger. In conclusion, it seems as though any enemy within Destiny can be a boss as long as they are enlarged by 50% in Photoshop. All jokes aside, it's extremely boring seeing the same reskin bosses over and over in strikes. This isn't year 1 where everything is brand new and we're excited to explore. It's just simply not the case. We've seen the bosses, we've seen the enemies, we don't want to play the same content over and over. I'm personally looking for a brand new experience, and that is not what Destiny 2 strikes provide me. In the past, strikes have gotten away with the same concept because they had interesting mechanics, and the bosses for the most part felt like they were constantly evolving. In Destiny 2, on the other hand, every boss follows the exact same pattern or mechanic that I'll talk about in just a second. For me specifically, I enjoyed several bosses found in strikes in D1, like the Dust Palace, the Sunless Cell, Fallen Saber, Shield Brothers, Echo Chamber, a strike boss that was heavily designed by Dado, and then of course the Wretched Eye. Even though most of these strikes feature reskinned enemies and reskinned bosses, they had enough depth and complexity to basically cover this up and make them a lot more enjoyable. I understand that introducing a completely new Fallen or Vex enemy type just as a strike boss may be hard work, Bungie, but Destiny 2 is a new game and we need to have new experiences. Someone surely should have known that having past enemies as bigger strike bosses with the exact same mechanics would have been boring and repetitive only a little while after launch. They introduced a new Cabal enemy type that looks like a dog for the story and raid. Why not have a 3-headed one with each head providing a different elemental attack type as a strike boss? Now, I mean, I made that up within 2 minutes of writing this script, and it sounds pretty damn awesome. I mean, they already have the assets for a dog in the game, so why not just give one of the dogs 3 heads, make him a boss? Sounds pretty cool, but I could be wrong. Anyways, let's talk about the current mechanics for all the bosses found in Strikes. There's one very annoying and common theme that is basically that all the bosses run and hide after you do a certain amount of damage to them. In some Strikes, this boring and frustrating mechanic is a lot more noticeable, like the Vandal at the end of Exodus Crash, or maybe even the Pyramidion Strike. That one's also pretty common in terms of what mechanic they do. Now, basically, every Strike encounter follows this simple strategy. You do 25 to 30% of the damage to the boss. He will then run, hide, teleport, jump into a spot which makes him invincible. In the meantime, small enemies will spawn which will basically bother you. You gotta kill them, then the boss comes back out of hiding and you must do damage again, and from there it's just a simple rinse and repeat until he's dead. This is not only extremely predictable after even like a day, but it's just very boring and repetitive. If we look at the mechanics of my personal favorite Strikes in Destiny 1, we can see that the encounters themselves were much more complex and fun overall. The Darkblade became extremely aggressive after his helmet was shot off with enough damage. This was my favorite Strike because it was very difficult to see in the boss room as it was very dark, and the boss himself would disappear and sometimes reappear right behind you. This would scare the crap out of me and my teammates at times, and there was definitely nothing like it in Destiny. Another very fun Strike was the Shield Brothers. This was unique as it was one of the only Strikes in the game where we faced two foes at the exact same time. You can make the argument that the vanilla Destiny Strikes were boring, and for the most part, I think I'd be more than inclined to agree, but the Taken King Strikes were released more than 2 years ago. It's almost as if Bungie hasn't learned from the massive amounts of success that they had with that expansion. For a lot of people, including myself, it was the greatest time period within Destiny's franchise, as I made so many memories, and honestly, they fixed so many of the mistakes that the Destiny 1 base game originally had. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about the problems surrounding the loot or lack thereof. Nightfalls alone aren't worth doing when compared to things like public heroic events, as they take much longer and don't provide the same amount of high quality loot. You could roughly do 3 public heroic events in the same time that it takes you to complete 1 Nightfall Strike, and that simply is not acceptable. The Prestige Nightfall is even worse, as you get the same loot as a regular Nightfall other than the aura and the emblem. In addition to the lack of loot, Bungie removed Strike-specific loot entirely moving forward into Destiny 2. Now this to me was the most absolutely shocking thing, because out of all the dumb things I've seen people complain about, this was one that was universally appreciated by most of the Destiny community. Not only was this gear not handed out on a silver platter, but it was also beautifully designed, making it unique. This gave all players alike a strong incentive to play Strikes and get this somewhat rare gear. For those that don't know, Strike-specific loot was added into Destiny with the Taken King expansion more than 2 years ago. This is ample time to redesign the system if there were any flaws to begin with and add it into Destiny 2. It would also make lots of sense to add this system into the game, as it would promote longevity, and that's something that we currently don't have in Destiny 2. Ultimately, I'm not too sure why all of these choices were made in relation to Strikes. The amount of awesome design work that went into them is most definitely unparalleled, but it feels wasted in the sense that the poor bosses and poor loot system is dragging it all down. I really want to appreciate the fantastic design and the artwork on a day-to-day basis while I'm running through these Strikes, but it's so difficult to do so when I feel like every other aspect of Strikes are completely wrong. As a player who enjoyed grinding Strikes on a day-to-day basis in D1, I feel like Destiny 2's equivalent doesn't necessarily value my time. It doesn't challenge me in any reasonable capacity, or at least the boss doesn't, and most importantly, it doesn't reward me accordingly. Out of all 3 of these problems, I think the biggest is the lack of any new or interesting mechanics for the boss, and of course, like I already mentioned, the underwhelming loot. If these 2 things were fixed, I really don't think myself or any others in the community would really ever complain about Strikes. Everything else would be pretty dandy. I really don't think there would be any other problems. Everything else with Strikes is great, there's a good amount of them, they're long enough in length, and the design work, like I already mentioned, is breathtaking. To conclude, I want to mention that I know this game will get better with time. I think mechanics will advance moving forward to future DLC, and I think the loot system will be generously improved. That's not my issue though. My issue is that it should have been near perfect at the launch instead of where it's at now. I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant here, but I feel like we've always been stuck in this continuous loop within Destiny where we were promised something amazing through either trailers or hype or whatever the case may be, and then we get the product and, you know, it's good, but we're a little bit disappointed, like the case was in Destiny 1. And then, you know, we've always been told it'll get better, the next DLC will come, the next update will come, the next patch or balance or expansion for that matter will come, and it'll make everything great. Well, why can't we just get a great product at launch? I mean, there were glaring problems in Destiny 1, and there's glaring issues with Destiny 2's endgame. And I feel like being stuck in the same loop of waiting for DLC to come out and waiting for updates to come out is just such a terrible environment to be in, because it almost feels like I'm getting cheated as a consumer. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that's just the way that I honestly, genuinely feel. But regardless, that's going to do it for the video, guys. I want to thank you all very much for watching, as always, and listening. Please let me know what you think currently of strikes in the comments down below. Of course, critique me as much as you want. If you want to be harsh and you think strikes are great, then let me know. I would love to hear all of that stuff, because right now, I feel very passionate about this specific topic, as you can probably tell by this rather long and insightful video. So let me know. I'll be reading all the comments down below in the comment section, and if you enjoyed, definitely consider dropping a like rating, as it always supports my channel. Subscribe for more daily Destiny 2 content. Have yourselves a great day, and I'll see you all later. Peace.